The cold, fluorescent lights of the veterinary clinic cast harsh shadows across Abby's tear-stained face as she cradled Max, her once powerful German shepherd, now just skin and bones in her trembling arms. His breathing came in shallow gasps, each one seeming like it might be his last. "It's time, Max," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his graying muzzle. "You've fought so hard." Outside the window thunder rolled, just like that terrible day 5 years ago when Wildfire had claimed everything she loved, everything except this loyal dog who had pulled her from the flames when all hope seemed lost. Dr. Miller entered, syringe in hand, his face a mask of professional compassion. But as he approached, something caught his eye. He frowned, leaning closer to examine Max's face. "Wait," he said, setting the syringe down. "Something's not right." Abby looked up, confusion mingling with grief as the veterinarian's words hung in the sterile air between them. "We can't put him down. Not today. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Abigail Reynolds had been a pediatric nurse at Pacific Coast General for nearly a decade, but no amount of professional experience with suffering had prepared her for watching her own beloved companion waste away. At 36, she lived alone in a modest cottage on the outskirts of Harborview, the same small Oregon coastal town where she'd grown up. Though the landscape had been forever altered by the catastrophic wildfire 5 years earlier, that fire had taken everything from her parents' younger brother, their family home, and all the memories contained within its walls. The authorities had warned residents to evacuate, but Abby's father, stubborn to the end, had insisted they could weather the threat. By the time the winds shifted and flames engulfed their neighborhood, it was too late. Abby alone had survived, pulled from the burning house by a powerful German shepherd from the county's K-9 rescue unit. Max had found her unconscious near a collapsed stairwell, the smoke nearly claiming her life. The dog had dragged her to safety where rescue workers could reach her. In the aftermath, when Abby learned that Max's handler had perished in a separate rescue attempt, she couldn't bear the thought of the hero dog being sent to another handler, or worse, retired to a kennel. She'd adopted him, and they'd healed together, two survivors bound by shared trauma and quiet resilience. Until 3 months ago, Max had been the picture of health, despite his advancing years. At 10, he still carried himself with the dignity of his training, his dark eyes alert and intelligent. Then came the arthritis diagnosis. Normal for his age and breed. Dr. Miller had said, prescribing Naturopet's newest medication for aging canines. Paw Relief. The drug had been heavily advertised with commercials showing elderly dogs romping like puppies again. What Abby couldn't know was that the medication that promised to ease Max's golden years was slowly poisoning him. The $150 per month was a substantial sum on a nurse's salary, but Abby hadn't hesitated, especially after using her savings to help Marcus Williams, an 8-year-old patient whose family couldn't afford a critical surgery. When Max began deteriorating rapidly, Abby faced the horrible truth she could neither afford extensive treatment nor bear to watch him suffer. Dr. Nathan Miller understood her predicament all too well. A former Army veterinarian who had served with military dogs in Afghanistan, he recognized the bond between handler and dog. When Abby had called about euthanasia, his heart had broken for them both. The morning Abby had decided to end Max's suffering began like any other, except for the weight of finality that hung in the air. She had risen before dawn, unable to sleep, and spent those quiet hours sitting beside Max's bed, running her fingers through his once lustrous coat. the medication that was supposed to help him. Paw, relief, the miracle drug for aging dogs, seemed to have accelerated his decline instead. His once powerful frame had become gaunt, his eyes cloudy and unfocused. Worst of all were the tremors that racked his body, leaving him whimpering in pain. "I can't let you suffer any more, old friend," Abby whispered, tears streaming down her face. She'd made the appointment with Dr. Miller for 9 p.m., giving herself these final hours to say goodbye. At 7, she cooked Max's favorite meal, a simple hamburger patty, something she'd rarely allowed him as a treat. He barely touched it, managing only a few listless licks before turning away. That, more than anything, confirmed for Abby that she was making the right decision, however much it tore at her heart. By 8, she had packed a small bag with Max's favorite blanket, the worn tennis ball he'd carried around for years, and an envelope containing a letter she'd written the night before. The letter detailed every way Max had saved her, not just from the fire, but from the despair that followed. She planned to read it to him in his final moments, a testament to a life well lived and deeply appreciated. "Ready for a ride, Max?" she asked, forcing brightness into her voice. At the word ride, Max's ears had once perked up eagerly. Now he merely raised his head slightly, his eyes finding hers with what seemed like resigned understanding. It took all her strength to help him into the car, his once powerful legs barely able to support his weight. The drive to Harborview Veterinary Clinic was mercifully short. Abby parked in the rear lot close to the entrance. Dr. Miller had suggested they use a private door that would spare them walking through the main waiting room with its curious eyes and healthy pets. The doctor was waiting for them, his kind face solemn as he helped Abby guide Max into the specially prepared room. "Take all the time you need," he said softly, leaving them alone with the promise to return when Abby signaled she was ready. The euthanasia room was nothing like the sterile clinical space Abby had feared. Dr. Miller had transformed it with soft lighting, comfortable blankets spread on the floor, and even a small vase of fresh flowers on the windowsill. Abby settled onto the blankets, guiding Max to lie beside her, his heavy head resting in her lap. With trembling hands, she unfolded her letter and began to read. "My dearest Max," she started, her voice catching. "How do I begin to thank the dog who saved not just my life, but my soul? When the fire took everything I loved, you pulled me from the darkness, literally and figuratively." She read on, recounting their years together, the quiet companionship, the nightmares from which he'd woken her with gentle nudges, the slow rebuilding of a life forever altered by loss. By the time she finished, her tears had soaked into Max's fur, but there was also a sense of peace. She had said everything she needed to say. Abby pressed the small button Dr. Miller had left, signaling she was ready. When he entered, syringe in hand, she felt a strange calm. This final act of love, sparing Max further suffering, was the least she could do for the dog who had given her so much. Dr. Miller knelt beside them, his movements gentle and unhurried. He carefully examined Max one last time, checking his gums, his eyes, the rhythm of his labored breathing. It was then that his professional demeanor changed, a slight frown crossing his features. "Abby," he said slowly, "has Max been displaying any symptoms besides the pain and weakness? Any changes in his eyes or skin tone?" Confused, Abby nodded. "His eyes have been yellowing a bit, and he's had some redness around his muzzle. I assumed it was just part of the end." Dr. Miller set the syringe down and pulled a small penlight from his pocket, examining Max's eyes more closely. "And you said these symptoms started after he began taking paw relief?" "Yes, within a few weeks." "Why does it matter now?" Her voice cracked with frustration. The veterinarian's expression had grown intensely focused. "It might matter very much," he said. "I've seen something similar in another patient recently, also on paw relief." He placed a gentle hand on Abby's shoulder. "I don't want to give you false hope, but I think we should postpone today's procedure. Would you be willing to try something? Stop the medication completely and bring Max back in a week." Abby stared at him, afraid to let even a glimmer of hope into her heart. "You think the medicine is making him sick? But it's supposed to help him." "That's what it's supposed to do," Dr. Miller replied grimly. "I'm not sure that's what it's doing. Will you trust me on this?" The drive home from the veterinary clinic felt surreal to Abby. Max lay quietly in the back seat, his breathing still labored but somehow less desperate than before. Hope was a dangerous thing. Abby knew, especially hope that arrived at the 11th hour when you'd already made your peace with loss. Once inside, Max settled heavily onto his bed in the living room corner, while Abby gathered up the bottles of paw relief that had been stationed throughout the house kitchen counter, bedroom shelf, bathroom cabinet, constant reminders of the regimen she'd followed so faithfully. She lined the bottles up on the kitchen table, frowning at the cheerful packaging with its images of rejuvenated senior dogs playing like puppies. The television commercials for Paw Relief had been equally upbeat, featuring testimonials from owners whose aging pets had apparently experienced miraculous recoveries, $150 per month, a substantial sum on a nurse's salary. But Abby hadn't hesitated. Max deserved whatever might ease his path into old age. Now, following Dr. Miller's instructions, she dumped the remaining pills into a plastic bag and buried it deep in the trash. No more medications, no more forcing pills down Max's reluctant throat. Just wait and watch. The first 3 days brought little change. Max remained lethargic, barely eating, spending most of his time sleeping. Abby took time off work, calling in favors from colleagues to cover her shifts. She slept on the couch beside Max's bed, waking at the slightest sound to check on him. By the third night, doubt had begun to creep in. Had she just prolonged his suffering? Was Dr. Miller grasping at straws, unwilling to perform a necessary but painful service? Then came the 4th morning. Abby woke to an unfamiliar sensation, something cold and wet pressing against her hand that dangled off the couch. Opening her eyes, she found Max standing beside her, his nose nudging her fingers. "Max," she whispered, afraid to believe what she was seeing. The German shepherd gave a soft whine, not of pain, but the familiar sound he'd always made when hungry. His tail, which had hung lifelessly for weeks, gave the slightest wag. Scrambling to sit up, Abby cupped Max's face in her hands, examining him closely. The yellowing in his eyes seemed less pronounced, and though he was still painfully thin, there was an alertness in his gaze that had been absent for too long. "You want breakfast, boy?" Her voice quavered with emotion as Max responded with another gentle whine. In the kitchen, Max managed to eat half a bowl of softened kibble, more than he'd consumed in a single sitting for weeks. Afterward, instead of retreating immediately to his bed, he followed Abby to the back door and stood expectantly. When she opened it, he stepped gingerly into the small fenced yard, lifting his nose to the morning breeze. Abby stood watching from the doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth to stifle a sob. This was far from the robust, powerful dog who had pulled her from the burning house, but it was also markedly different from the suffering animal she'd nearly euthanized just days before. By the 5th day, Max was able to make it around the block on a slow walk, stopping frequently but moving with growing confidence. On the 6th day, when the mail carrier approached the house, Max actually barked, a hoarse shadow of his once authoritative warning, but a bark nonetheless. When she called Dr. Miller to report these changes, his response was measured but encouraging. "Bring him in tomorrow as planned," he said. "I want to run some tests. See if what I'm suspecting holds water." "And what are you suspecting?" Abby asked. There was a pause. "I'd rather not say until I'm more certain. Just keep doing what you're doing. No medication. Good food. Gentle exercise." The following morning, Abby and Max returned to the clinic. This time through the front entrance. Several people in the waiting room looked up in surprise. Many were locals who knew Max's story, who had seen his decline, who had perhaps even heard about his scheduled euthanasia. "Isn't that the Reynolds rescue dog?" she overheard one elderly woman whisper. "I thought he was on his last legs." Dr. Miller welcomed them into an examination room, his face breaking into a genuine smile as Max walked in under his own power. He conducted a thorough examination, drawing blood samples and checking Max's vitals with methodical care. "His color is better," he noted, examining Max's gums, "and the yellowing in his eyes has definitely decreased. Has his appetite improved?" "Daily?" Abby reported. "He's eating almost normally now, and he's more alert, more present." She hesitated. "Nathan, what's going on?" "A week ago, he was dying." The veterinarian leaned against the examination table, his expression turning serious. "I believe Max was having an adverse reaction to paw relief, a severe one. But how is that possible?" "It's made by NatraPet, and they're the biggest pet pharmaceutical company in the country. Wouldn't they test for reactions like this?" "You would think so," Dr. Miller replied, his tone carefully neutral. "The thing is, I've started noticing a pattern. In the last 6 months, I've had 3 other senior dogs present with similar symptoms, all on paw relief. 2 were too far gone to save, but the 3rd improved after we discontinued the medication, just like Max." Abby's nursing background kicked in. "Could it be a bad batch, some kind of contamination in the manufacturing process?" "Maybe." He didn't sound convinced. "But there's something else. I've been doing some research, reaching out to colleagues in other practices. It's not just here in Harborview. Vets across the state are reporting similar cases." "That can't be coincidence," Abby said slowly. "No, I don't believe it is." Dr. Miller's voice hardened. "Abby, I think we need to look into this further. If paw relief is harming animals instead of helping them, people need to know." Abby looked down at Max, who sat patiently at her feet, still thin, still aged, but alive and improving. How many other beloved pets had been lost because their owners, like her, trusted a company's claims without question? "What do we do next?" she asked. Dr. Miller hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have mentioned sooner." He sat down on his stool, rubbing a hand over his face. "Before I opened my practice here in Harborview, I worked for NatraPet in their research division." Abby stared at him in surprise. "You worked for them. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it didn't end well." His expression darkened. "I was part of the early development team for paw relief. During initial testing, I noticed some concerning liver values in a subset of test subjects, primarily older dogs with certain genetic markers. I flagged it in my reports, recommended more extensive testing before release." "And," Abby prompted when he fell silent, "and I was told the anomalies were statistically insignificant. When I pushed, suggesting we at least include a warning about potential side effects, I was first sidelined, then let go. Budget cuts was the official reason." His bitter laugh held no humor. "A month later, Paw Relief hit the market with a massive advertising campaign and not a word about the issues I'd identified." Abby sat back, processing this revelation. So, you knew all along what might be happening to Max. I suspected, he corrected. But I needed confirmation. I couldn't just make accusations against a powerful corporation based on a hunch. He met her eyes directly. Abby, this goes beyond Max now. We need to get this information out, but Naturapet won't make it easy. They have a lot to lose. The meeting with Naturapet was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at their regional headquarters in Portland, a gleaming glass building that dominated the downtown skyline. Abby had taken a personal day from the hospital, leaving Max in the care of her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, who had been following his recovery with grandmotherly concern. Dr. Miller picked Abby up in his aging Subaru, his normally casual demeanor replaced by uncharacteristic formality. He wore a suit that had seen better days, his tie knotted with the careful precision of someone who rarely wore one. "You didn't have to dress up on my account," Abby said, attempting to lighten the mood. "Not for you," he replied grimly. "Corporate types take you more seriously when you look the part, and we need them to take us very seriously indeed." The 3-hour drive passed with Dr. Miller briefing Abby on what to expect. The regional director, William "Bill" Calloway, had agreed to meet them along with the company's senior veterinary consultant and a representative from their legal department. This last detail had raised red flags for both of them. "They're already in defensive mode," Dr. Miller noted. "But that's actually good. It means they know there's something to defend against." Abby stared out the window at the passing farmland. "What if they just shut us down, tell us we're mistaken, and show us the door? Then we go to Plan B, which is taking our evidence public." He glanced at her. "But that comes with risks. Naturapet has deep pockets and an army of lawyers. They could make life very difficult for both of us." Abby thought of Max, of the other pets who had suffered, of the owners who had lost their companions without ever knowing why. Some things are worth the risk. At the Naturapet headquarters, they were ushered through security with efficiency that bordered on coldness. The receptionist, a young woman with an immaculate appearance and practiced smile, escorted them to a conference room on the 23rd floor with sweeping views of the Willamette River. "Mr. Calloway will be with you shortly," she informed them, offering coffee or water that both declined. Left alone, Abby felt suddenly out of her depth. Her navy pantsuit, the one she reserved for job interviews and parent conferences at the hospital, seemed shabby compared to the opulence surrounding them. Even Dr. Miller appeared uncomfortable, adjusting and readjusting the files he had placed on the polished table. "Remember," he said quietly, "no matter how they try to intimidate us, we have facts on our side." The door opened, admitting 3 people, a silver-haired man in his 60s with the confident bearing of long-time authority, a middle-aged woman whose white coat and stethoscope seemed calculated to establish medical credibility, and a younger man with sharp eyes who carried a leather portfolio and said nothing as he took his seat. "Dr. Miller, Ms. Reynolds." The older man began extending his hand. "William Calloway, Regional Director. Thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention. This is Dr. Patricia Lawson, our senior veterinary consultant, and Mr. Eric Daniels from our legal department." The introductions complete, Calloway settled into the chair at the head of the table, his expression a careful blend of concern and professional detachment. "Now, I understand you have some questions about our Paw Relief product line." Dr. Miller didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We have more than questions, Mr. Calloway. We have evidence that Paw Relief is causing serious illness in the animals it's supposed to be helping." He opened his file, sliding across several sheets of neatly organized data. "I've documented 27 cases so far, all with the same pattern of symptoms, all improving when the medication is discontinued." Dr. Lawson picked up the papers, scanning them with a frown. This is quite an accusation. Dr. Miller Paw Relief underwent extensive clinical trials before release. It's been on the market for 18 months with an excellent safety profile. With respect, Dr. Lawson, the evidence suggests otherwise. Dr. Miller pulled out more documentation, blood test results before and after, photos, testimonials from pet owners. These aren't isolated incidents. They represent a pattern of adverse reactions that can't be dismissed as coincidence. The legal representative Daniels, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. Have you considered that these animals were already ill? Paw Relief is prescribed for aging pets, many of whom have underlying conditions. Correlation doesn't equal causation. Abby, who had been observing quietly, found herself speaking up. My dog Max was healthy, apart from mild arthritis, when he started Paw Relief. Within 3 months, he was nearly dead. 1 week after stopping the medication, he showed marked improvement. That's not correlation, that's direct cause and effect. One case hardly constitutes scientific evidence, Dr. Lawson replied, her tone condescending. It's not just one case, Abby countered, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. Did you even look at the files Dr. Miller provided? 27 cases, all with the same pattern? The tentative victory with NaturePet brought Abby a sense of cautious optimism. But life has a way of tempering hope with harsh reality. 3 weeks after their meeting with CEO William Calloway, as the company began its nationwide recall of Paw Relief, Max's health took an alarming turn for the worse. It began with subtle signs that Abby, now hypervigilant about her companion's well-being, noticed immediately a reluctance to eat, a heaviness in his movements that went beyond his usual arthritis. By the second day, Max couldn't rise from his bed without assistance. His breathing labored and his once bright eyes clouded with pain. It doesn't make sense, Abby told Dr. Miller over the phone, her voice tight with fear. He's been off Paw Relief for nearly 2 months. He was getting better. Bring him in right away, Dr. Miller instructed, concern evident in his tone. Sometimes these toxins can have delayed effects, or there might be permanent damage we didn't initially detect. The drive to the clinic was a blur of anxiety. For Abby, Max lay quietly in the back seat, his massive head resting on a pillow, his eyes following her movements whenever she glanced back at him. There was a resignation in his gaze that frightened her more than any physical symptom, as if he understood something she wasn't yet ready to accept. Dr. Miller was waiting when they arrived, helping Abby guide Max gently into an examination room. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he checked vital signs, drew blood, and conducted a thorough examination. His kidney values are concerning, he said, finally studying the preliminary results. And there's fluid building up in his lungs. I'd like to keep him overnight for observation and more comprehensive testing. Is it the Paw Relief? Abby asked, her throat tight. Some kind of relapse? Dr. Miller's expression was grave. It could be residual damage from the medication. Yes, but Max is also an older dog with a history of trauma from his working days. There might be underlying conditions that were masked by the more acute symptoms from Paw Relief. Abby nodded, trying to process what she was hearing. Will he? She couldn't bring herself to finish the question. Dr. Miller placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I don't know, Abby, but we'll do everything we can. Leaving Max at the clinic was one of the hardest things Abby had ever done. She kissed his graying muzzle, promising to return first thing in the morning, then walked to her car on unsteady legs. The house felt unbearably empty without Max's presence. No click of nails on hardwood, no heavy sigh as he settled in his favorite spot. no watchful eyes following her movements. She tried to distract herself by reviewing the legal documents their attorney had prepared regarding Naturapet's proposed settlement and oversight committee. The company appeared to be honoring its commitments with the recall proceeding smoothly and the victims' fund already accepting applications. But the words on the page blurred as Abby's thoughts continually returned to Max. Sleep eluded her that night. She dozed fitfully on the couch, startling awake at every creak of the house, half expecting to hear Max's familiar whine at the back door. By dawn she had given up on rest entirely, brewing a pot of coffee and waiting impatiently for the hour when she could reasonably return to the clinic. Dr. Miller called before she could leave. "Abby," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "I think you should come in as soon as you can." The measured tone told her everything she needed to know. "How bad is it?" A pause. "The tests show advanced kidney failure likely developing for some time, but accelerated by the paw relief. There's also evidence of a heart condition, something common in older shepherds. I've made him comfortable, but I'm on my way," Abby said, already reaching for her keys. At the clinic, Dr. Miller led her to a quiet room in the back, away from the bustle of the main treatment area. Max lay on a padded bed, an IV line running into his foreleg, his breathing shallow but steady. When he saw Abby, his tail gave the faintest thump against the blanket. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, kneeling beside him and stroking his fur. She looked up at Dr. Miller, who stood watching from the doorway. "Tell me honestly, Nathan, what are we looking at?" The cold reality of Max's passing settled over Abby like a heavy blanket, numbing her to everything but the raw ache of loss. In her darkest hour, with her most faithful companion gone, she felt more alone than she had since the wildfire receded. Her victory against Natura Pet, the pending settlement, the promise of reforms, none of it seemed to matter in the face of this final, irrevocable loss. As dawn broke the day after Max's burial in her garden, Abby sat beside the freshly turned earth and newly planted dogwood sapling emptied of tears but still aching with grief. The fragile tree stood upright in the early light, a promise of growth and continuance that seemed impossibly distant from her current pain. "I don't know how to do this without you," she whispered to the silent garden. "You were the last piece of that life, the bridge between then and now." She traced her fingers over the soil. "How do I move forward from here?" As if in answer, her phone rang, cutting through the morning stillness. Dr. Miller's number. Abby stared at the ringing phone for several seconds before answering, her voice rough from crying. "Nathan! Abby! I'm sorry to call so early." Dr. Miller said, his tone urgent. "Is this a bad time?" She almost laughed at the question. What could be a worse time? But she simply said, "It's fine." "What is it?" "I've been up all night reviewing Max's test results. Something didn't sit right with me, so I ran additional analyses." He paused. "Abby, the kidney failure wasn't just from residual paw relief damage." Her grief-fogged mind struggled to process his words. "What do you mean?" "There were traces of a different compound in his blood work, ethylene glycol metabolites. It's commonly found in antifreeze." "Antifreeze," Abby repeated, confused. "That's impossible. I don't even have any in my house." "That's just it," Dr. Miller said, his voice grave. "It wouldn't have been in your house. Max would have had to ingest it within the 48 hours before he started showing symptoms." The implication slowly dawned on her. "You think someone poisoned him deliberately?" "I can't confirm it with absolute certainty, but the evidence suggests it. The concentration was too high for accidental exposure." There was hesitation in his voice. Abby, who knew you were meeting with Natra Pet, who knew about your involvement in the investigation. Abby's mind raced through possibilities. Their meeting with William Calloway had been private, but the fired CFO, Michael Townsend, had clearly known about it. The Tribune article had named her, and her address wasn't difficult to find. And then there was the earlier break-in at her house. "You think this is connected to the Paw Relief case?" she said, a cold anger beginning to replace her numbness. "Someone poisoned Max to silence us or get revenge." "It's a possibility we need to consider," Dr. Miller replied. "I've already contacted the police to report my findings. They want to speak with you as well." Abby looked at the fresh soil covering Max's grave, the grief within her crystallizing into something harder and more focused. "I'll be right there." Dem. The following weeks passed in a blur of police interviews, legal consultations, and sleepless nights. The investigation into Max's poisoning proceeded slowly, with forensic teams combing through Abby's yard and neighborhood for evidence. Though nothing conclusive was found immediately, Detective Morales, a no-nonsense woman who had 2 German shepherds of her own, seemed personally invested in finding answers. "Whoever did this was careful," she told Abby after their third meeting. "But people who do these kinds of things often get careless. Eventually, we'll keep looking." Meanwhile, the case against Natura Pet had taken on new dimensions. When news of Max's suspicious death broke, public outrage intensified. William Calloway issued a statement expressing shock and condemning the act, while reiterating the company's commitment to making amends for the Paw Relief situation. He also announced the temporary suspension of Michael Townsend pending investigation into possible involvement, a move that sent the company's already struggling stock into another tailspin. Margaret Linden, a silver-haired woman who specialized in corporate malfeasance cases and had taken on Abby's case, advised caution during a meeting in her downtown office. "This changes things," she explained. "If we can establish a connection between Max's poisoning and Natra Pet, even through a rogue employee, the settlement value increases dramatically. But more importantly, it potentially moves from civil to criminal territory." Dr. Miller, who had accompanied Abby to the meeting, spoke up. "What about the oversight committee Calloway proposed? Is that still on the table?" "It is," Margaret confirmed. "In fact, Calloway has been surprisingly proactive throughout this whole ordeal. He's expanded the proposed committee's authority and added independent veterinary researchers to its roster." She turned to Abby. "He's also asked specifically about your willingness to still participate despite recent events." The breakthrough in Max's case came from an unexpected source 3 days later. As Abby sorted through a box of Max's things, his leash, his brushes, the special treats she'd bought for him, her doorbell rang. Detective Morales stood on her porch, accompanied by a uniformed officer. "We have news," Morales said without preamble. "May we come in?" 1 year later, Abby stood in her garden beside the dogwood tree that now stood nearly 5 feet tall, its branches spread wide over Max's resting place. The sapling had flourished beyond all expectations, much like the seeds of change planted in the aftermath of his death. White blossoms covered its branches, a few petals drifting down to rest on the stone marker she'd placed there, simply inscribed, "Max, he saved more than just lives." "I think he would approve," came a voice from behind her. Abby turned to see Dr. Miller dressed in his customary khakis and button-down shirt rather than his veterinary scrubs, a folder tucked under his arm. "Of all of it," Abby smiled, a genuine expression that had become easier with the passage of time. "I think so, too." She glanced at her watch. "Are we running late?" "Right on schedule," he assured her. "The others are meeting us at the community center. Everything's ready." Together they walked to Dr. Miller's car, now a newer model. one of the few indulgences he'd allowed himself since the settlement. Money had been distributed. Abby had been more conservative, with her portion putting most of it into a foundation that now bore Max's name. As they drove through Harborview toward the community center, Abby reflected on the tumultuous year that had passed. Michael Townsend had eventually pleaded guilty to animal cruelty charges, receiving a 3-year sentence that many in the community felt was too lenient. The board member Elizabeth Crawford, who had orchestrated the entire scheme to oust Calloway and take over the company, faced even more serious charges, including corporate espionage and conspiracy. NaturePet, under William Calloway's leadership, had undergone a complete organizational restructuring with the Independent Oversight Committee, including both Abby and Dr. Miller, reviewing every aspect of their research and development process. The paw relief scandal, as it had come to be known, had rippled through the pet pharmaceutical industry, prompting new regulations and testing requirements. Other companies, seeing the financial and reputational damage NaturePet had suffered, rushed to review their own products and protocols. It wasn't a perfect system yet, but it was significantly improved. Nervous? Dr. Miller asked as they pulled into the parking lot of the Harborview Community Center. A little, Abby admitted. It's one thing to work behind the scenes on the committee. Public speaking is different. You'll be great, he assured her. Just speak from the heart, like you always do. Inside, the large meeting room was already filling with people, veterinarians, pet owners, local officials, and reporters. A banner stretched across the front wall reading, "The Max Foundation, 1 year of progress." Tables along the sides displayed informational materials about pet medication, safety, adoption opportunities from local shelters, and the Foundation's various initiatives. William Calloway was already there chatting with the mayor. He spotted Abby and Dr. Miller excusing himself to greet them. Over the past year, their professional relationship had evolved into something approaching friendship, built on a shared commitment to reform, and perhaps the unique connection they all shared with Max. As more people arrived, including many who had lost pets to paw relief, and others whose animals had been saved by the recall, Abby made her way to the podium. The room quieted as she adjusted the microphone, looking out at the faces turned expectantly toward her. A year ago, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, I lost my best friend. But what I didn't know then was that Max would continue to rescue others even after he was gone. His story, our story, sparked a movement that has changed how pet medications are developed, tested, and monitored. As she continued outlining the Foundation's accomplishments and future goals, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The raw wound of Max's loss had gradually transformed into something productive, not diminishing her grief, but giving it meaning and purpose that would help countless others. When Max rested his aging head on Abby's lap that final day at the veterinary clinic, he wasn't just a dog saying goodbye. He was a chapter of life, closing a reminder of how deeply our animal companions witness our journey. For those of us in our golden years who've loved and lost faithful pets, Max's story touches that tender place where grief and gratitude meet. Like Abby, many of us have weathered storms of loss, spouses, friends, our own health challenges, with a loyal animal beside us, asking nothing but offering everything. These creatures mark our days with routine and purpose when retirement empties our calendars. They listen without judgment when our children are busy with their own lives. They warm our laps when arthritis brings pain. Their passing leaves a silence in our homes that echoes with memory. But Abby's journey reminds us that grief, when channeled toward purpose, blooms like her dogwood tree, not erasing our loss, but transforming it. In our wisdom years, we understand profound truths. Loving deeply means risking heartbreak. Yet that same heartbreak can inspire change that outlives us all. Max's legacy whispers that it's never too late to begin again, to rescue and be rescued once more. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.